under the dim glow of a luxurious hotel in Chongqing, where the walls seemed to whisper secrets, a brave British businessman named Neil Haywood collapsed in a sealed room, a glass of wine in his hand still carrying the faint scent of poison. It was November 14th, 2011, a moment that seemed ordinary, yet would soon ignite the biggest political earthquake China had seen in decades. No one could have predicted that this death would lead to the downfall of one of China's most powerful rising stars, Bo Xilai, a man once hailed as a hero against corruption, the fearless leader who had waged war on crime in Chongqing. But now his name was entangled in shocking allegations: corruption, abuse of power, and covering up a murder committed by his own wife. That night, a chilling air settled over the city of 30 million, as if even nature itself sensed that something was terribly wrong. Chongqing, the metropolis Bo Xilai had transformed into a symbol of economic rise and social justice, was now at the heart of political turmoil and suspicion. From the bustling streets to the power corridors of Beijing, all eyes turned toward him, a princeling of the communist elite, son of a revolutionary hero, a man once destined to join China's next generation of leaders. But instead of glory, what awaited him was a trial of the century, where his darkest secrets would be laid bare, sending shockwaves through the highest ranks of power. This is not just the story of a murder. It is a tragedy of ambition, betrayal, and the deep shadows lurking within China's political machine. Neil Haywood was no stranger to the Bo family, a tall, well-dressed British businessman, always seen with a polite smile and a finely tailored suit. He had spent years weaving his way into the inner circle of Bo Xilai and his powerful wife, Gu Kailai, a sharp-witted lawyer with an elegant presence and a gaze as cold as steel. Rumors swirled that Haywood had been instrumental in helping the family move money overseas, vast sums, whose origins no one dared to question. But their once close relationship had turned into a ticking time bomb. People close to Haywood recalled that in the months leading up to his death, he had become increasingly anxious, often mentioning that he felt threatened after a heated argument with Gu Kailai. What had happened between them? Some whispered it was about money. Haywood demanded a larger cut from their secret dealings. Others believed he knew too much, and that made him a liability. At first, Haywood's death sparked no controversy. Hotel staff found him lifeless on his bed, an empty whiskey bottle nearby, a few scattered pills on the floor. Local police quickly ruled it an alcohol-related death, a convenient and unquestioned conclusion. His body was cremated within days, no autopsy, no notification to his family in England. But everything changed on February 6th, 2012. That day, a man burst into the U.S. consulate in Chengdu, nearly 200 miles from Chongqing, his face pale with fear, his hands trembling. It was Wang Lijun, Bo Xilai's right-hand man, the man who had spearheaded the anti-mafia crackdown that had made Bo famous. He had helped imprison thousands of criminals, elevating Bo's image as a fearless leader. But now, Wang was no longer a loyal soldier. He had come seeking asylum, carrying a story that would shake Beijing to its core. Neil Haywood did not die from alcohol. He had been poisoned, and the person responsible, Gu Kailai, with Bo Xilai's complicity. Wang's revelation ignited a political firestorm. He claimed that after he uncovered the truth, he had confronted Bo Xilai. But instead of cooperating, Bo flew into a rage, slapped him in the face, and threatened to make him disappear. Realizing his own life was now in danger, Wang knew he had only one escape route: the U.S. consulate. He only remained inside for 24 hours before Chinese security forces escorted him away. But what he had revealed was enough to trigger a high-level investigation. At the time, Bo Xilai was not just any official. He was a Politburo member and party secretary of Chongqing, one of the rising stars in Chinese politics. Yet despite his public confidence, the walls were closing in. On March 15, 2012, in a stunning move, Bo was removed from his post. Weeks later, he was arrested, and Gu Kailai was taken into custody. As the news spread, Chongqing fell under a strange atmosphere. a mix of curiosity and fear. People who had once admired Bo Xilai for his modernized roads, towering skyscrapers, and crime-fighting image began to whisper rumors that his family had amassed tens of millions through corruption, that Gu Kailai wasn't just responsible for Haywood's murder, but possibly others as well. Meanwhile, in Beijing, the highest ranks of the Communist Party held closed-door meetings, scrambling to contain the growing scandal. Because this wasn't just about one man, it was a crack in the carefully crafted image of unity and integrity within the party. Bo Xilai wasn't just a politician, he was a factional symbol, a man with ambitions for the highest seat of power. His downfall wasn't just a personal defeat, it was a devastating blow to both his allies and enemies in China's political arena. Bạn nói đúng, tôi sẽ đích mạch lạc như bản gốc mà không chia phần nữa. De la Bandit. The investigation was no longer just a local affair in Chongqing. It had become a brutal political battle where every move was calculated with precision. Investigators from Beijing arrived, carrying suitcases full of documents and cold, unreadable expressions. They searched the Bo family's luxurious villa, a grand estate hidden behind lush green trees where elite gatherings were once held. Inside, they discovered vaults filled with cash and gold, real estate documents linked to properties overseas, from France to the UK, all registered under shell companies controlled by Gu Kailai. But what shocked them the most were the secret audio recordings that Wang Lijun had handed over before his arrest. In them, Gu Kailai's sharp voice could be heard ordering her assistant to deal with Haywood, followed by a chilling warning. If this gets out, no one survives. Gu Kailai was arrested soon after, in April 2012. As she was escorted away, she remained eerily composed, her short black hair framing a pale face, lips pressed tightly together in silence. Investigators quickly pieced together what had happened that night at the hotel. According to a close aide, Haywood had been lured to Chongqing under the pretense of a business meeting. Gu Kailai personally offered him a drink, one laced with cyanide, a poison that kills in minutes. As Haywood collapsed, her assistant cleaned the scene, ensuring that no evidence remained. But why did she do it? Some claimed that Haywood had threatened to expose the family's secret offshore fortune if he wasn't paid more. Others believed he was simply a pawn in a larger scheme by Gu Kailai to protect her husband's crumbling empire. Meanwhile, Bo Xilai was being held in a secret facility in Beijing, his whereabouts unknown. The once powerful man who had stood before thousands championing the China dream was now a shadow of himself. The last photos of him showed a man who had aged drastically, his once dark hair turning white, his eyes sunken and hollow. Investigators accused him not only of knowing about the murder, but of orchestrating its cover-up, using his influence to pressure local police into ruling Haywood's death as an accident. But Bo refused to go down without a fight. During interrogations, he shouted that he had been framed, claiming that his downfall was part of a political conspiracy orchestrated by his rivals to eliminate him ahead of the 18th Party Congress, where he had once been considered a strong candidate for the Politburo. The next major development came from an unexpected source, Neil Haywood's family. After months of silence, they spoke out from London, demanding that the British government intervene. Emails from Haywood, sent to his family shortly before his death, were revealed. In them, he wrote about feeling imminent danger and mentioned people in Chongqing I can't trust. The pressure on Beijing intensified, forcing authorities to handle the case with more transparency. Investigators began digging deeper into Bo Xilai's past, tracing his rise to power back to his time as mayor of Dalian in the 1990s. What they uncovered was staggering. A massive corruption network involving hundreds of millions of yuan from land deals, construction projects, and bribes from corporate giants. Each new revelation struck another blow to Bo's carefully crafted image as a champion of the people. But not everything was as clear as it seemed. Wang Lijun, the man who had exposed it all, did not escape unscathed. He was charged with abuse of power, taking bribes, and even using his infamous anti-mafia campaign as a tool to eliminate Bo's rivals. Some began to wonder, was Wang telling the full truth, or was he simply trying to save himself by dragging Bo down with him? And in the shadows, another question loomed. Who were the real players pulling the strings in Beijing? Some whispered that this had never been about justice, but about eliminating a political threat. As Bo Xilai's trial drew closer, China's atmosphere grew tense, as if the entire nation was holding its breath. This was not just about one man's fate. It was about exposing the hidden cracks in a system that millions had long suspected, but no one had dared to confront. On August 9, 2012, the courtroom in Hefei, Anhui Province, was filled with tense silence. Gu Kailai entered, no longer resembling the powerful woman who once stood beside Bo Xilai at grand political events. She wore a simple prison uniform, her hair disheveled, her hands tightly shackled. In front of her sat a row of carefully selected journalists, forbidden from recording or photographing, only allowed to take handwritten notes. This was the first trial, and it played out like a carefully scripted drama, every detail meticulously controlled by Beijing. The prosecutor's voice was steady but sharp as he read the charges. Gu Kailai was guilty of premeditated murder with evidence from her aide's testimony, Wang Lijun's secret recordings, and traces of cyanide found in Neil Haywood's cremated remains, which his family had requested to be reanalyzed after raising suspicions. Gu offered no defense. She lowered her head, softly confessed to all charges, recounting how she had lured Haywood to the hotel, poured him a drink, and watched him collapse without hesitation. But what stunned the courtroom was her justification. She claimed she had done it to protect her family, to protect her son. Bo Guagua, the only son of Bo Xilai and Gu Kailai, was studying in the U.S. at the time. It was rumored that Haywood had threatened him over a financial dispute. Her plea for sympathy was met with chilling silence. It did not humanize her. It only highlighted the ruthlessness of a mother who killed to preserve her family's power. In less than a day, the verdict was delivered, a suspended death sentence, which, if she showed good behavior, would likely be commuted to life imprisonment. As she was led away, she did not shed a tear, only a vacant stare fixed on a distant point. More than a year later, on August 22, 2013, Bo Xilai's trial began in Jinan, Shandong Province. Unlike his wife, Bo entered the courtroom with his head held high, his silver hair neatly combed, his voice strong and commanding, just as it had been when he once spoke before crowds of thousands. This trial was not secretive. This time, the government allowed partial transparency, even broadcasting short clips on state television. A clear message was being sent nationwide. Bo was charged with 3 offenses: corruption, bribery, abuse of power. The prosecution revealed staggering figures, more than 20 million RMB in bribes, luxury gifts from businessmen, overseas assets funneled through his wife's secret accounts. They also accused him of knowing about Haywood's murder and ordering Wang Lijun to cover it up. But Bo Xilai refused to stay silent. He shouted down the charges, calling them absurd and fabricated. He denounced Wang Lijun as a traitor, claimed the recordings were forged, and insisted that his wife acted alone without his knowledge. At times, he turned the courtroom into his own stage, challenging the prosecutor, displaying the confidence of a veteran politician. "I have dedicated my life to this country," he said, his voice lowering, "and this is how they repay me." But the jury remained unmoved. After 5 intense days, the verdict was announced on September 22, 2013. Life imprisonment. Bo did not collapse upon hearing his sentence. He simply pressed his lips together, his eyes flashing with defiance before he was escorted away. Wang Lijun's trial had taken place earlier in September 2012. It was swift and efficient. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison for defecting to the U.S. consulate, accepting bribes, abusing his power. The once feared enforcer of Chongqing, the man known as the Wolf Hunter, had become a shadow of himself, bowing his head in silent acceptance of his fate. 3 trials, 3 downfalls, all leading to the collapse of the political empire Bo Xilai had built. As the final gavel struck, the courtroom felt lighter, as if the weight of the scandal had momentarily lifted. But outside, the storm had not truly passed. Whispers remained. Was this truly justice? Or was it merely a well-orchestrated purge? As the prison doors closed behind Bo Xilai, Gu Kailai, and Wang Lijun, China entered a strange silence. In the streets of Chongqing, posters once celebrating Bo's anti-mafia campaign were quietly removed, replaced with new slogans about harmony and stability. But beneath this surface of calm, the public's unease simmered. In tea houses, on tightly censored online forums, people whispered about the case, not with trust in justice, but with growing suspicion. Was Bo Xilai truly the corrupt figure Beijing portrayed him to be? Or was he merely a sacrificial pawn in a much larger political game, a victim of factional struggles as Beijing's power blocks maneuvered ahead of the 18th Party Congress? The international reaction was equally sharp. In the UK, Neil Heywood's family condemned the lack of transparency in the investigation. Why was his body so quickly cremated? Why hadn't the British government exerted more pressure to uncover the full truth behind the mysterious death of one of its own citizens? Major news outlets, including The Guardian and BBC, called it China's biggest political scandal since Tiananmen, exposing the hidden fractures of a system where power and secrecy were inseparable. In the US, analysts saw Bo Xilai's downfall as a clear signal. Beijing was willing to sacrifice anyone, even one of their own princelings, to maintain political stability ahead of Xi Jinping's rise to power. But the real impact of the case was felt in Chongqing itself. For many, Bo Xilai had been a hero. He built bridges, expanded roads, created jobs, and made people feel proud of their city. Now his name was forever stained with crime, and those who once admired him felt betrayed. Some still believed in his innocence, convinced that he had been targeted by rivals jealous of his success. Others simply shook their heads and said, "Power corrupts." Bo was just another example. Regardless of their stance, the image of Chongqing had changed, from a symbol of progress to a city tainted by corruption and bloodshed. As for Bo Guogua, the only son of Bo Xilai and Gu Kailai, he all but disappeared from the public eye. After graduating from Harvard, he lived quietly in the US, avoiding all media questions. Rumors swirled that he had once hired lawyers to appeal his mother's sentence, but failed. Some speculated that he carried an unspoken guilt. If not for the financial disputes between him and Heywood, perhaps this tragedy would have never unfolded. But whatever the truth, only he knew it, and he chose to bury it in silence. Yet, the Bo Xilai case did not fully disappear as Beijing had hoped. Years later, unanswered questions still lingered like shadows in the corridors of power. Who truly ordered Heywood's murder? Was it only Gu Kailai, or had higher forces in Beijing played a role? Did Wang Lijun reveal everything he knew, or had he withheld crucial truths to save himself? And more than anything, how many other secrets still lay hidden, locked behind the walls of China's ruling elite, never to be revealed? The Bo family's villa in Chongqing now stood abandoned, shattered windows, overgrown weeds, and a crumbling entrance. Locals whispered that on quiet nights, the wind howled through its empty halls like the ghostly echoes of a story with no ending. Because in the end, this was not just the downfall of one man or one family. It was a mirror reflecting the deep contradictions of modern China, a nation caught between ambition and discipline, personal power and collective control. Bo Xilai's name may now only exist in history books, locked away in an unknown prison where no one could reach him. But the legacy he left behind, both his achievements and his sins, still lingers in the minds of millions. And somewhere beneath the dust of time, the full truth of that fateful night in a Chongqing hotel may still be waiting. Silent, patient, hoping one day to finally come to light.